All right, everybody, welcome to Sweetcast. I might be 5 minutes late, but some of you would even say I'm 3 weeks late because I think it's literally been 3 weeks since I've posted anything on YouTube, which is that might be the longest stint I've gone so far. So I don't know what that what that means, but it'll be fun. I'm happy to be here with Eric Breen. Welcome.
How's it going?
I've got Joe Corallo. Welcome.
It's true. I am here. Hello.
And we're gonna be talking 80s Spider-Man comics, which is gonna be really fun. Especially, I know I've already showed this, but I'm gonna show it off again because I'm being a show off. But I got into custom binding, and this was one. I have 2 volumes of this for the DeFalco run, and this was the what I chose for the front cover, back cover. We're not gonna do a retrospective on the entire thing, but we selected 2 individual issues out from this lot to do retrospective on, read and discuss, and it was a lot of fun. I love going back to just 80s comics. There's something about them that's unrivaled. It's awesome.
Yes. No, absolutely. It's a great era. This is from that Jim Shooter era that people bring up from time to time.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, Wes and I did a video where we were doing the best decade in comics, and he thought I was going to pick the 80s because I'd been talking about it, and I went with the 60s. And then in the 2 years since then, I've reread a ton of 80s because I was obviously, you can tell by looking at me, I was around for them, and you'd be hard pressed to find a better decade because there was so many of the all-time great runs were from the 80s. And I said that Spider-Man, although I don't know that would crack the top 5, it was always consistently good.
Yeah, it's a fun one. These have a special place in my heart because it kind of I credit this for getting me into comics. It wasn't these 2 issues, but the same run, and it was fun. So I'm excited to get into these a little bit. Let me say good hello to the chat here real quick as we're kind of getting warmed up. We have Paul Riley here. Hello, it's been a while. That's an understatement. Happy to be back though. Statistical Zero is here. I've paused the music to have a listen for a bit. Hello, Clint, panel, and chat. Good to see you, Cam. Good evening, sweetie and crew. Hello, Cam. Good to see you. Creators Outlet, Hell Nerds. You're in the right place. Evening, Clint, says Eric Hammond. Welcome.
That Paul guy looks like he'll probably like talking about Spider-Man, if I had to guess.
I bet. So I've got to ask. So I think this was. I'll share my screen here. Well, so I pulled up the issues so you can see them, the covers here in all their glory on the computer. But of this run, there's actually a lot of really important turning points. There's a lot of like things that have shaped Spider-Man going forward. Even the original Spider-Man trilogy stuff taken from this. Or really, I mean, MJ. Like, there's so much about this run that's actually super iconic. It doesn't have an omnibus made though yet. Except of course I've got mine. But there's just a lot of interesting things about this run. So my question, I think for Joe, because this was your decision, I believe. Why these
Eric
2
and I
issues?
talked about it.
Okay, you both talked. Give me the explanation of why these particular 2 issues.
For me, and Eric will jump in when I wrap up here, but I feel like it's such a. I mean, it's a great 2-parter. I think it's one of the highlights of DeFalco and friends on this run. But Spider-Man really gets to be heroic. I don't want to spoil what happens yet, but it is a story about Spider-Man having to overcome crazy odds. I mean, hopefully it's not a spoiler for people to know that Fire Lord is a very powerful character in the Marvel universe. He is a character that you would assume is outclasses Peter Parker, and for him to be in a situation that he puts himself in, to help people and try to stop Firelord when there isn't much of an option. Like it's a good heroic story.
Yeah. And the spoiler alert is right here on issue 270. That's basically how it ends. But yeah, there's a lot of classic, because the more I thought about it as I was reading through it, there's so many classic Spider-Man elements in here that it was like, oh wow, this is actually the perfect. So what about you, Eric? Why these two issues?
They're first thing, these two issues should be read by anybody that attempts to write Spider-Man today. It won't be, and it hasn't been, and that's obvious. But in the 80s, there are two-part stories that really demonstrate what Spider-Man, who he is, and just how determined he is to overcome impossible odds. The first one, which predates us by 40 issues, was 229 and 230. Nothing can stop the Juggernaut. Where it's basically the same. This is basically the same story, only in the first one, the Avengers didn't come to save the day, to show up at the end when it was over. Yeah. But impossible odds, someone that he can't possibly beat. I mean, because you see, as we'll talk about, what all he does, what it takes to put Firelord in a position for what you see on the cover to happen. Same thing with the Juggernaut. I mean, you can literally, drop buildings on him and he's just going to get right up. Yeah. So it's, I think modern writers have completely lost sight of what who Spider-Man is. And this is a good reminder for people to realize that only know him now as kind of like a joke character, or however you look at him today. These are the stories that you need to read to realize just why he's arguably the greatest hero in the Marvel universe. Yes, you have Captain America, yes, you have other characters, but Spider-Man, just his perseverance is second to none.
Yeah. So the high stakes, that's one thing that is really upfront, and there are points where Spider-Man is, well, I don't know the best way to do a retrospective, but we'll probably start at the beginning, because it initially, right off the bat, it introduces Firelord, and it shows him in his element in space. He's so powerful, he breaks a comet, a meteor that's made out of lead. So here's if you can see that. Maybe I'll make my screen big, actually. Here, that'd probably be the smart thing to do.
Oh.
There we go. So yeah, you can see this. He's breaking meteors. He's extremely powerful. And that was one thing, for the few number of pages that these two issues covered. They did a really good job of outlining how powerful he is. Not only that, but Peter Parker himself will say, I mean, sort of his natural tendency would be to not fight. But he wants to run away. And that was Peter Parker's initial problem, right? His natural reaction is he's going to, run away. And then his Uncle Ben dies because of that impulse, right? And that theme gets brought up again as well. But I actually started believing him for a moment when he's like, oh, I'm going to get the Fantastic Four. This is something that they should deal with, So yeah, they did a really good job of just outlining how behind he was, but not only that, but he failed to defeat him so many ways. Like what was that? Dropping a building on him. I mean, running him into a train. Like there was like 5 or 6 different things he attempted to do that didn't work.
Yeah.
Stakes. What are the stakes? What do you think? Firelord, that's sort of the topic, I guess, first.
Well, the stakes being Firelord is a threat to everyone, because everyone who since humans denied him Tony's pizza, that's it for
all over pizza. That's right.
That's it for New York, which is, I appreciate that. It's good stuff. It's worth it. But one thing too, I'll just point out is one of the only things about this story that really like grounds it in a way, other than there's some other events, but is that it's so close to Secret Wars 2, so they have to talk about the Beyonder and all that.
Oh yeah.
And, which is, I think, fair to say, no one's favorite Secret Wars.
Yeah.
I think is a good way to put it. But yeah, they tie the way things were going under Jim Shooter. There was a lot of stuff that ties everything together. So if you weren't reading Spider-Man, like you're pointing out before, they take that time in the beginning to show you how powerful Firelord is before he arrives to Earth, and then they do the bit with the people get upset with Firelord because they think he's a mutant. They think he's a mutie, so
Yeah.
he, brings that up, and it's done in a way to, also let the audience know, like, oh, there's also these other characters, the mutants, the X-Men, which makes no sense really in the Spider-Man comic, because there's almost no way you were picking up Spider-Man and not fully aware of the X-Men dominance by the mid-late 80s.
Right. Yeah. But there's also because one big, you can't be a comic book nerd without comparing power levels. And this was one point too, where all of those bystanders are like, oh, we thought he was just a mutie. And so him being from outer space made him, he was just more powerful than any mutant, or you could assume, your average mutant, he's going to be a lot more powerful.
But do want to point out that another difference between comics when they were good versus today is it wasn't, he doesn't walk in, sit down politely, put a napkin, on and say, I would like to order a pie, and do you have any Grey Poupon? He comes in, basically demands service because he's Firelord. And when the guy says, I'd love to make you pizza, but the ovens aren't turned on, he just obliterates one. So
That's right.
it's like these guys sitting there have a reason to want to stop this guy because he's in there basically tearing up their favorite pizza joint. So it's not like they're just attacking unprovoked, which you would get in today's comics more often than not. So the default setting, I guess, because the 80s was the decade that the X-Men exploded, and every 5 minutes there was a new mutant popping up.
Mm-hmm.
So it made sense from a story purpose, even though it was a Spider-Man comic book. So as far as like the Peter Parker, like I said, first instinct is to run away. I saw was where he was willing to confront him, realized how overmatched it was, because at some point, because Firelord also likes him some Firelord. So he was quick to point out that he was once a herald of Galactus. Yeah. Now, even your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man knows who Galactus is, because I believe, if nothing, he watched a Galactus Fantastic Four Battle and Burns thing. So even if he, but it's like, I am screwed. So he goes, okay, I need help. Wasn't so much, I'm going to go get somebody else and then go run away. Now, there is that one point where he thinks about it, where he starts to put on his clothes and he goes, no, I can't do that. I can't let that happen ever again. Yeah. So that's, so again, like I said, there's a lot going on in these two issues.
Yeah. There's shying away from that kind of thing. I think a lot in comics of, well, Peter Parker's overcome that, and so he's going to be a hero all the time, and this could go with any character. But I appreciated the fact that they had him, like, this is something that Peter Parker struggles with, and he's not good enough. It's the guilt that drives him to initially take it on, and then he's persistent. But they had the Aunt May, the little Aunt May stuff at the beginning that'll be tied in later, again, about Aunt May asking him to go back to school and stop taking pictures, and that again is like more of that guilt driven Peter Parker I don't know, character line. But it is interesting how that comes. And these two issues did a really good job of tying that in.
She played remember when Uncle Ben got you your first microscope card?
Yeah.
I mean, how much more guilt can you lay on the poor guy? I mean, it was like, yeah, Petey, come over for some wheat cakes and guilt.
Wheat cakes, yep. Yeah, I love it. The black suit is fun. That's one thing that is about this run that I loved, is just switching back and forth between black suit Spider-Man versus your traditional Spider-Man. I saw an interview somewhere, maybe you guys saw this. I think it was Tom DeFalco. I could be wrong, but they said if they did a black suit Spider-Man, the story was more about action and that kind of angle. If it was the traditional Spider-Man costume, then it was more about Peter Parker, the human. I didn't see that in these two issues. I don't know if you guys ever heard that about this run. I've got to look up the documentary, but
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there were ideas like that. Like I'd have to like really go through all these issues again and keep that in mind to think about it. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there were ideas there. They might have talked about it and maybe it didn't quite always line up.
Yeah,
because you have to get the issue out the door, and if the artist does it one way or something, then
and part of it was just he got over the black suit and the fan base loved the black suit, and so they kept bringing back out the black suit, so you didn't know what you were getting in either issue. But this was completely black suit Spider-Man from beginning to end. So
yeah, but one interesting thing though that is true is Ron Frenz, after doing 38 issues, like the first 38 issues is more inspired intentionally by Ditko. And then when he did his 39th issue, he started doing it more like John Romita Sr.
Yeah. Cam says, that's a great hero story foundation when you realize you are the help that everyone is looking for.
Yeah.
I like that. And I kept, for me, I was expecting the Avengers to jump in because he kept saying, oh, this is a job for Fantastic Four. This is a job for the Avengers. They're on the cover of the 270, but they were literally just showed up to watch the beatdown finish.
He also said this is a job for Superman, but that didn't get past editorial.
Oh, yeah. Go figure. That's funny. So I'm counting the different ways that, how do you beat Firelord? There was initially the crowd of people that sprayed him down with a fire hose. I thought that might work, but it didn't. Not for long. It just made him mad. They had a fight. Firelord knocked a building. That was the other thing, is how many buildings were destroyed in these two issues alone.
A lot of condemned buildings in New York at the time.
Yeah. This was hitting like, Zack Snyder Man of Steel levels of buildings getting.
Only minus the buildings full of people.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, the spider web backpack is always interesting to me when I see that show up, because I think there's a reason it's there. What's the reason? Here it was the clothing, his civvy clothes that he could switch into. Let's see. He got hit by a train. They threw a chunk of building at him. He actually burst through 3 buildings. I don't know if you can see this. Wait, there we go, right there. The Cthulhu, that's Firelord blasting through 3 separate buildings, all lined up. It just kept going. So I liked it. What I don't know. So if we kind of get into, if I break it down into the Peter Parker element, we talked about that a little bit. Action. One of the big complaints or critiques I've seen from this run of Spider-Man is that there's a lot of talking. There's not a lot of action. These two issues beg to differ. It was almost completely action. I mean, there's tons of action, even though there were those human elements as well.
I'd like to respond to any criticism of that sort of in this era. One thing that, and I heard somebody bring this up, and I thought it was a great point. So we don't have subplots anymore in comics because there's no guarantee that the writer will be on the title long enough to pay them off.
Yeah.
But in these days, they were. So if there were issues where there was dialogue heavy, it had something to say. It was advancing subplots along. So to me, that's far more interesting than how many comics do you see today where half of it takes place at a bistro or a coffee shop or a restaurant where it's just nothing but talking with that's actually not saying anything.
Yeah.
Sure.
Filling time.
This might be a hot take moment. Maybe I'll let I'm curious, Breen, what you think, because one of the other criticisms, since we were bringing up criticisms, Clint, is you see a lot of people talk about sort of the Roger Stern, JR run. They'll talk about Craven's Last Hunt, and then they'll jump to McFarlane, Larson, and Bagley. And they often skip this era. And a lot of them, and I think Todd himself has talked about it this way, of that, the book just felt too static, and it was like his sort of art that elevated the book and was, it clearly brought people in, his artwork. But do you think that for you personally, not sales, but you personally, was McFarlane that much of a step up from Ron Frenz?
From a style standpoint, I'd have to say yes, because as you pointed out, and I'd never noticed this about the 38 issues doing Ditko, then switching to Romita.
Yeah.
When Ron Frenz seemed to be Tom DeFalco's house penciler, because he did a lot of the Thors on DeFalco's Thor run, where he kind of adopted a pseudo Jack Kirby style.
Yeah.
So Frenz was kind of that guy that could imitate people as needed. So it's like who is Ron Frenz?
Yeah.
But and McFarlane was just so. I mean, you saw it. You saw glimpses of it in Infinity Inc. Certainly saw some during his time on the Hulk, but this was, I think the inking was almost like it was downplayed to let McFarlane's pencils shine through as never before. So this was the most McFarlane we've gotten to date, and I would say as dynamic as it was, I think you could already see signs of him. And I know I'm going to probably piss people off by saying this. Tom McFarlane kind of became a funhouse mirror version of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And you could already see traces of it in this. Now, not enough to detract, because this was a phenomenal run. I just read a couple issues of that run today.
Nice.
And it was so, the difference was so stark that you couldn't help but notice it. But as far as like, did I like the book any better because of that? I would say no. I mean, because I think DeFalco's a heck of a writer, Michelini's a heck of a writer, Stern was. So I said it was just consistently good.
Yeah.
Something to be said about the context. And so if Spider-Man was, I mean, there's not necessarily a formula, but there's within your expectations what you're going to get with Spider-Man and the artwork and everything, and then McFarlane being a departure from that, as that being the context. Maybe that's part of it. Having said that, I think I like, as far as story goes, I'm not a big fan of McFarlane's Spider-Man run.
Mm-hmm.
Just as far as story goes, I like the art quite a bit, but the story, I don't know, I've never been a massive fan of that run. So
you're not alone here.
Yeah. Resident antagonist, hello, thanks for joining us while you unpack in your new apartment. Cam says, at the time McFarlane was huge. Looking back, no. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, one interesting thing too, what was it? Talking to Jim Salicrup, who edited the book around, I think maybe a little before Craven's Last Hunt, but definitely by Craven's Last Hunt, was editing the book. It was talking about how you know, everyone would talk about how much of a big success, you know, Venom was. And he would mention, like, you know, he created a bunch of other villains too. You remember Chance? You know, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's there were some duds in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Rob Liefeld's got a pretty good record of character creation as well, but but yeah, you
Yeah,
don't the ones you don't remember though, right?
yeah, no, he created in that, like, one issue. What was it? It was like Deadpool, Domino, and that other guy.
Yeah, you can't win them all, I guess, right? Sort of taking it back to the comic here. There are a couple things which I always like about 80s comics. They always make me smile. There's little moments like they would not write that comic today, but they're talking about what the Wasp. She's probably painting her fingernails right now. I wouldn't. So, a little.
I got to tell you real quick that book I showed right before we went on the air, that Tales to Astonish 57. It's the first time Spider-Man and the Wasp met, and they didn't like each other as people because wasps and spiders are natural enemies. I guess what we didn't realize is Jan was bitten by a radioactive wasp too.
That was the precursor for all the spider totem stuff, I guess. So one other moment is the construction workers. Something within Spider-Man is the bystanders. Like as a character, just like the extras in Spider-Man ring a little different than they do. I don't know, maybe in Daredevil. Maybe it's just me, but it becomes they're important to progressing the plot forward. And they're buffoons at the same time. But it was interesting to me that really this whole problem, let's pretend that Firelord got into Tony's Pizza, he had a great pizza, and he took off. Everything would have been fine if it wasn't for those construction workers with their fire hose, that showed up.
Yeah.
So that's one. But then at the end, they have a chance to redeem themselves. All they have to do is demolish this building with Spider-Man and Star-Lord in it, right? And they're having some some of them don't want to do it because they don't want to kill anybody. We can't blow the building with people in there. And then one guy is happy to do it because he doesn't care about those two freaks anyway. They demolish the building yet again. This is another building, by the way, that has been demolished. It's still not enough to take down Firelord. So I just thought it was funny because it was bringing in the construction guys again. There's always the extras that play a part, and I always think that's fun.
Oh yeah, no, I think Spider-Man in general, from the beginning through this time, had pretty colorful extras.
Yeah,
Marvel in general did a lot better with their bystanders than the distinguished competition. Because they were the old Stan Lee thing was, the world outside your window. So it's like if the world outside your window was filled with impossibly powerful universe traversing characters, but yeah, then there's also the real people, and no series did that better than the original Marvels, I believe it was called, the painted series from the early 90s. But yeah, going back to and Spider-Man was probably more famous. And people say that I pull stuff out of my couch. It's scary. That is scary. Unrehearsed, folks.
Unrehearsed.
Joe, we're spending too much time together. But Spider-Man's, it was almost like he had a rogues gallery of bystanders. And that's one of the things that made Marvel so much more fun. Was it because they would sometimes some of the best writing and the best humor came from the peanut galleries. Just hanging out in the panels.
Absolutely. Let me say hello to our Glennian. Welcome. Greetings all. Hi, Clint. Statistical Zero has got to fly. Hey, thanks for tuning in as long as you did. Yeah, that was definitely something that stood out to me that was fun. Also, blowing up a gas station And what did he say? There was like 3 city blocks that happened to be abandoned.
Yes. It was very this is very specific time. So you have to be in your mid-30s to understand what I'm about to say. Is it reminded me of the original English dubs of Dragon Ball Z, where they went out of their way to be like, oh, it's a good thing no one was in this building when it exploded, or like, oh, I can see their parachutes. Everyone got out of the helicopter okay.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Well, yeah, it was even like down to the train. It's like, hey, it'd be awesome to run a train over him, through him, he's got to pierce through it, but no one can die because that'll defeat the whole purpose, But yeah, it was fun. I appreciated the Fire Lord crashing into a gas station, and it taking out a few city blocks in a massive explosion. That was awesome. Yeah. So what about the artwork? I want to go there first. There was a ton of action in this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this was a better highlight of what Ron Friends could do on this run than maybe some of the other issues too, because there is so much dynamic action. He's running all over Manhattan. There's it's crazy how recognizable the Grand Central Station like area is like today. It's just still so similar, and to just see that all drawn out, like this is really dynamic artwork, I think, from Ron Friends and throughout this whole story.
And detailed too. That was
Mhm.
one thing as I was going through it. I'm like, there's backgrounds in every single panel, and some are intense. Yeah, again, very recognizable. Central Station's a good example. This panel might have been one of my favorites from it, right there at the top.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, very well. But yeah, it's like woman's face. She's scared. You see the whole fight there. It's even down to the ceiling panels. Like it just looks great.
It's and you bring it up. One of my complaints about I know it feels like I'm picking on modern comics is how flat a lot of the art feels.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Friends was never considered an upper echelon artist, yet you look at these and you go, this is every bit as dynamic as anything anybody's doing today, and superior to the vast majority. And when people ask why are people so in love with 80s comics, this was not the exception. This was the norm.
Yeah.
It's like, Richard had a good video kind of along those lines a couple days ago, where he just put on the screen all the comics that came out in a particular month of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, look at all this stuff. We get excited when we get 1 or 2 books now that were just absolutely littering the landscape in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sharing some artwork while you're talking, but this is a good example. Oh man, I'm gonna have a hard time centering that. This is a good example because this is toward the end, or maybe it is the exact end. It's toward the end, and it's just rubble kind of rounding things off. But these 3 panels at the bottom have so much detail. I know my fingers are in the way. So much detail in them of just rubble. But that was one thing that really stood out to me. It's just there's so much to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you continuity buffs, and yes, kids, comics used to have that. In the next issue of the Avengers, the first scene is Hercules dressing down Firelord for causing all of this, all these problems from the last 2 issues of Spider-Man.
I love it. There's a lot to balance too. Joe, you kind of brought it up a little bit earlier, but having to tie in subplots, having to tie in, hey, we have an event coming up there. We gotta make reference to Secret Wars. We gotta. There's just a lot of those kind of logistical things that have to happen in a comic book, especially in this era. But then to also make it an interesting story for just reading these 2 issues, that would be, Stan Lee's gold standard, right? Was that any issue could be someone's first issue. And they totally work. I always think about that, especially in these older issues. Would this work as my first two issues? Absolutely, they would.
Yeah.
We did leave out one. So in those 2 issues you brought up, Aunt May wanting Peter to go back to school, and at this point, Nate Lubinsky, who was Aunt May's boyfriend, the guy in the wheelchair, who the shadowy figure was, looking for him, and that was a subplot that was dealt with in later issues. But he doesn't like the way I think his quote was, flighty nephew treats her.
Yeah.
So you had that animosity building. We also got the introduction to Kate Cushing, who I believe had been talked about for a long time before we actually met her. And then she takes JJJ's cigar, breaks it in half. And I just love the line when, Jonah and Robbie are talking afterwards, and he closed with, "Oh, and Robbie, yeah, hide your pipe."
Hide your pipe, yeah.
Yeah, so that was great.
It's just great little moments that these books used to have all the time.
Let's see. No, wrong page. There we go, right there.
Look at the art on that Reese's thing.
Yeah, these are fun too. I love that's one thing about omnibuses that you miss is the ads. I actually had a lot of fun doing that.
As long as they have the hostess ads, I'm in.
Yeah. And I love the Reese's Pieces and Aliens. I don't know if you guys have followed any of the news lately, but with alien stuff, I heard, I'm trying to remember what they were saying, like, these aliens don't like Reese's Pieces. Like, that's not going to convince them. So it was fun to see that. Yeah, there's a lot going on in these issues as well. And that's, I mean, just story-wise, plot-wise, and sometimes my complaint with not all, but many modern comics is it feels like, hey, we're going to do 6 issues to tell this story arc, and there's not enough to fill that 6 issues. So that's what it just feels like you have to pass through another issue to get through more story. There's just a lot of plot in these 2 issues. Yeah. And again, that's characteristic of the time for sure.
Well, another thing that with these 2 issues versus today, we were talking about stakes. Yeah, theoretically, there was the possibility that Firelord was going to just wreak havoc, or there was the possibility he was just going to beat the crap out of Spider-Man and leave. So compared to what you see today, where everything seems to be an end of the universe event on top of another end of the universe event, the stakes are low, but this made it feel so much bigger, because when everything is a universe-ending event, then nothing is. This felt big because of the power disparagence and just the way it was written. That, again, that's another lesson that a lot of modern writers could learn from these, because in the pre-writing for the trades days, look what you get in 2 issues versus 6 or more today. I mean, I said, because there was you didn't have to pay. This would be a 6-issue arc today. It would, even with Tom DeFalco writing, it would probably get a little thin if you try to get 4 more issues out of this. And that's the problem. Another thing with today was everything has to be spaced out into 6 issues.
Yeah. And this, there were a few, I don't know, there's some nice symbolic things. To me, this is could be a good palate cleanser. Like if you're going between story arcs, you're getting really deep into Spider-Man, and you read these 2 issues, again, it reminds you of who Peter Parker is. It reminds you of how powerful he is, and big part of his power is just his will, And so I loved that kind of, it could just reset you, I guess, between story arcs. I just love that it doesn't have to be 6 issues. It can be 2. So with him winning, I'm going to do some spoiler alerts here at the end, but the way that he saves the day, at first it seems like his effort is to get somebody else. It's somebody else's problem. It's the Fantastic Four. It's the Avengers. And ultimately, or it could be a gas station, it could be demolishing a building, like any of this stuff. And at the end, ultimately, it's Spider-Man with his bare hands that solves the problem. So at first you might think, oh, I mean, that's a little silly, but it's actually kind of it was interesting because it was symbolic, I think, for the whole story. So it actually wrapped things up for me really nicely. What did you think about the ending?
I had to do a real quick point out. Joe, was it just me, or did you have Chrissy Hines in your head when Spider was like, I went back to New York City, but my Baxter building was gone. that was my favorite moment. He goes, "Oh my God, how could I be so stupid?"
It's
Yes,
been
literally.
Yeah, I really did love that. I feel like we should also point out that the editor of this was Christopher Priest. So, just another name I think people know. And
was he Jim Owsley at the time? I didn't even pay attention. So it's
yeah, he was Jim Owsley at the time.
Yeah, no, this is just proof that if you can drop enough skyscrapers and trains and everything else, and then maybe a small scale nuclear style explosion, you too can maybe punch out Firelord. But I mean, because again, it took all of that for him to even have a chance, and he still basically just had to pummel him into submission. And like I said, he didn't even realize he'd already knocked him out,
right?
Because he's just like in full, self-preservation mode.
Yeah,
and like I said, if Captain America doesn't, tell him, said, I think you've won. It's like he might still be beating on him.
Yeah. And the two issues are also inked by different inkers. It's Joe Rubinstein for the first one, and then part 2 is Bob McLeod. They ink very similarly, but you could tell McLeod, he shades a little lighter if you look at it. Have you ever
seen them both in the same room together?
I have seen both of them, not at the same time.
I'm not 100% sure it's two different guys, because both of those guys were around when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I mean and that was always my take was, man, they do really have a similar style.
They
great.
Do.
I mean, if they were, I mean, they could make the worst penciler that art enjoyable. They were that good.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, everyone asked for Terry Austin. He was the big inker of the time, but yes, they were both very good.
I'm flipping back and forth to just compare just Spider-Man's mask, and I do notice a difference. I don't know if I could describe it. It almost seems like the next issue. Did you say that was McLeod?
Yeah, McLeod, I think, shades a little lighter.
And if you take Rubinstein or McLeod up to 11, you get Klaus Janson.
Yes.
There you go. He seems a little bit more less feathering too. Like it's more stark. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in like the hair shading, it looks like he doesn't go as heavy on the inks and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, themes in the story and kind of how it was wrapped up. I kind of pulled out a few, but I don't know any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll let Eric go first. Why
not? Please let me defer to you so I can come up with something.
Sure.
That's a tough one. Huh?
No, but no, I mean the themes, obviously there's that whole bit of like, being a hero and doing what's right and putting yourself in danger, do the right thing. What it means to be a hero, that's throughout the whole story. But just like a lot of Spider-Man stories, he's also getting chewed out for not doing right by his aunt and having all these other things going on. So but the core of it is the two parts of like what it means to be a hero in a story that, again, it's ridiculous because Firelord just wants pizza and gets mad because people hit him with a hose. It's not some like diabolical plot. It's not like terrorists taking over Manhattan or something. It's like, it's just, well, now that you hit me with this hose, I'm gonna murder you people, and he's got to stop him.
Right.
The moral of the story is, if you go into Tony's Pizza, don't fry an oven.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he doesn't do that, then maybe they leave him alone.
Yeah, be cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I mean, Spider-Man stories have a high stakes often, but this seemed up there. Like it was just major high stakes. You're right, and it's so funny because the beginning was so, it was over pizza.
Yeah.
but it actually reminded me of Moreland being introduced. The J. Michael Straczynski run, because I again felt at that time these stakes are so huge, but Moreland is after his very essence. Peter Parker's he's going to eat him basically. And here he just wants a slice of pizza. That's it. So it is funny, but these are, two opposite ends of the spectrums of making incredibly high stakes, even though it's just a fun premise for a story. So,
and it was so in character for Firelord, because if he was in a very large Thor arc that had been published probably about 10 years prior to that. So I think his first appearance was like in Thor 228 or 232, one of those. Yeah. And one of the things about Firelord is he is an arrogant prick. And so it's perfectly in character that he would, like I said, was his line, Firelord has deigned to dine here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then when he doesn't get his way instantly, like I said, he starts it. New York tries to finish it, and it's up to Spider-Man. And
yeah,
I said it's just the original line, with great power there must come great responsibilities. Perfect. This is a perfect example of that. These two issues.
Yeah, it's funny too that Firelord decides, hey, well, there's Earth. They have anything that can satisfy your desires. So many pleasurable things, and it came down to pizza. That was his one thing he was going for. So
okay, now you're just showing off, Joe.
Well, yeah, because I have the collection of Thor, right? I didn't even have to get up. No one saw me get up.
You just happened to be.
Is that wall of omnibus and trades just on a swivel? What issue was that? Did I at least get right with one of the two?
225, yeah.
Oh, nope, I was wrong twice.
Yeah.
Close.
Getting old in my old age.
I'm going to check in with the chat real quick here. Resident Antagonist says, sounds like the theme is juxtaposition of the hero's journey and your life. Common Spider-Man theme, but one I've always found interesting. DC never got that. Super was on talk shows. Yeah. Cam says, the real strange thing, it never makes sense to fight over New York pizza. I've seen videos out there. I know it happens. So...
I've seen rats dragging entire slices down the subway.
Too true. This was fun, and I'm excited to get back into this. I've actually rereading Superior Spider-Man with my son because he's like, I really want to read this, and so I've been reading it with him, and it's been kind of interesting to compare and contrast. It wasn't my favorite run in the world, but it's just interesting how just storytelling conventions have changed so much. It's interesting. But
it's not my favorite thing. I personally didn't particularly care for that story, but I know a lot of people that's like their highlight of Slots Run.
Yeah.
And, which I mean it works for some people. So,
yeah, I don't know. I had the whole run, so I thought, why not? I'll bind this, So I'm glad I did. It makes it a lot easier to reread, but it's been kind of interesting to compare them. One other thing too is the rotation of villains that come out. It was fun to see. Hey, we're gonna read Firelord. I don't know that I've ever actually read a comic book where Firelord is the villain. And that just shows my depth of comic reading, but it was just fun to see. And in this whole run, there are so many interesting villains or villains that make their first appearance here and don't ever show up again too, or might not often. I'm trying to think, who's the dude holding the rose? The Rose, right? Is that his name? I'm gonna find it.
He was in more issues than, what was it, Make Way for Slide with a Y?
Oh yeah,
I remember seeing Slide again.
I don't know if we'll ever get what was it, the Slug Bag?
There was the fat Spider-Man Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. I'll find it. It's in this run as well. Shoot, I can't remember. The
Oh
cover
yeah,
stood out so
the
much.
kid, yeah.
Yeah, it was a kid, right? Yeah, that was a fun one. Anyway, yeah, love it. Yeah, man, these were a couple fun issues to read. I love them because they work so well together, just as two. It's
Yep.
the final showdown. It introduced him, final showdown. Yeah, great pair of issues to select. And it just is a good reminder that this whole run is just full of these kinds of little story arcs and important points in Spider-Man's history, and I think it doesn't get enough love, so love it.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
kind of describing Tom DeFalco's career.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, no, he had
He's
to
always
follow.
he's the guy in between the guys that people talk about.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. He had to follow up Walt Simonson twice. That's nuts.
That's tough.
yeah, that is a tough one. Ooh, um, let me take a minute here. I would be a bad comic book creator if I didn't show this, but want to show everyone Downcast 4. This is the sponsor of today's stream. There's 13 hours left. I always think it doesn't really matter. It's on my own website. It does not really matter. But if you haven't backed it yet, please do. We're in production on this book, and I'm really excited. The colors on Eric's story are completely finished. Nacho's working on the last chapter. He's well into it. And so I'm excited to get this book out. So if you haven't backed it yet, Downcast Volume 4, check it out. It's the longest one so far. And I think what really helped me hit a stride on Downcast was going back to these older 80s comics and sort of channeling some of that energy. So it was really fun to write. If you like Downcast, I think you're going to love Downcast Volume 4. So do check that out. Do you guys have anything? Joe, you've got a million things going on, I'm sure. Do you have something to promote tonight?
Well, Dahlia in the Dark wrapped up in the last couple of weeks, so the trade will be out for that soon. But you might be able to get the issues 1 through 6. I edited a graphic novel for Mad Cave, the Carmen line by Dennis Hopeless and Peter Kowalski back in March. That's available. The trade for the Comicsology Originals book I did with the late Rachel Pollack and Eva Cabrera is out in July through Dark Horse. So yeah, that's some stuff.
Got a little of everything. Here's Dahlia in the Dark.
Yes.
Awesome cover. There you go,
Thank
number
you.
1, Mad Cave Studios. So you can,
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like here it is. It's available if you want to pick that up. But the trade's coming out soon. So
yeah, so
very cool. All right. What about you, Eric? Do you have anything to promote?
Well, yeah, just real quick, but I will say this is a really good read. Highly recommend it. So check it out. If you didn't get the individual issues, get the trade.
thank you.
Yeah, every Wednesday I do a show on the Graphic Man channel called the 4-Color Fossils. It's where a bunch of guys, at different lengths of tooth, show off older comics and older pop culture items. And if you like that kind of stuff, it's fun watch every Wednesdays at 8. And I wanted to plug Englantine's Saturday night comic auction. It usually starts at about 8:00. And it's sort of like the auction equivalent of nickel dime poker, because a lot of the books start at $1, $2, and it's a good way just to fill in runs. It's basically a live stream that we sell comics while we do, and
Nice.
it's also a lot of fun. Even if you're not a bidder, come check it out. And
it's fun to window shop all the same. Right.
And if you see something you like, you could actually afford the stuff on his. I've seen some of the other auctions. I can't even window shop there.
Yeah. You can look and imagine, but yeah, here you could actually pick some stuff up. So I love it. Okay, do check it out. Are there any other thoughts from these two issues that you had that you wanted to stick out? I had the advantage because I sort of set the agenda, but there were the bystanders. There were the classic Peter Parker not wanting to solve this problem, but rising up to the challenge. I mean, there were a few things I found really fun in this that I pulled out. But is there anything that I missed that you wanted to cover? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that we missed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're pretty thorough. I think we brought up most of the rest of the creative team. That really stood out. What was it? Joe Rosen's the letterer. He had been the letterer for a while and would soon be replaced by Rick Parker, who Jim Salicrup has said he didn't make him do it because his last name was Parker, but it didn't hurt either. And then what was it? The colorists for these two were was it George Russo's? But yeah, so I mean, I love this kind of coloring style too. I like flat colors. I like it gets too muddied, I think, when it's too rendered. But no, I mean, you get a nice tour of the city. People going everywhere. Like, yeah, no, I think I highly recommend, especially people who also, if you've never read this run, this is a good, like, here's 2 issues, check it out, and could probably suck you into the rest of this run, because it's a good solid run that's really overshadowed, being sandwiched between Roger Stern and Michelini.
And a good chunk of it's on this.
Yes, a good chunk
of it
is
which may be in print still. And these are all DeFalco issues.
I believe I think it was resolicited, so if it's not back in print right now, it will be shortly. I have I got this a while ago, so it was still $35. I think it's probably going to be $40 for the resolicit because they upped all the Epic collections. But I don't know, if you can get an Epic collection at a good price, I highly recommend that line. I do like omnibuses, but
just not there.
Yeah, but but Epic collections, I mean, in stock trades and cheap graphic novels have them at like around 40% off, which makes it a lot easier.
I did think they could have a problem with the doing an omnibus of Tom DeFalco, because he did another run of Spider-Man later on. And so it'd almost be like, well, how do you collect? I mean, this is the right way to collect it, is how I did it. It's just his first run straight through. But I don't know. I'd be interested to see how they do it. And Resident Antagonist makes a good point here. Send out an agenda to your guests next time. Bad Clint. Now go make me a comic book. Yeah. I did think there's a better way to do these and these retrospectives, but I think I should probably go over the whole entire creative team first, so you know who's working on it, lay out a premise, and I should take some pictures and do some screenshots instead of just showing my fat fingers on the screen. But but it's fun to talk about all the same.
Oh
yeah. Cool. Well, thanks. We'll do it again. I think I don't know, it'd be interesting if you have any ideas for other issues to read of anything. In fact, let's do it again. My mind's kind of turning now. There are a few that'd be fun to pull up.
There will be a few. I feel like I've still been wanting you to read, like, it's not that it's good, like, I want to say it is good Batman because you've read some good Batman, but like, you know what I mean? It's like you've read good Batman, but it's like year one Dark Knight Returns stuff.
It's Miller and post Miller Batman. And I read the first 2 issues of, like, the first ever 2 issues of Batman. And then
pretty good.
They are. It's like, there's the Joker. Like, so right off the bat, they had something that worked. But I'm missing a major chunk of Batman history, so that would be fun because we could pull some issues. So I don't know, be thinking about that. What would be a good issue or 2 to read from pre-Miller Batman?
And something you should read, and I'm not saying that we should do a retrospective on this because Joe and I have done one already.
Yeah.
But Detective 471 through 476, it's the Englehart Rogers issues.
Yeah.
If you want an idea of how good Batman could be pre, Miller, now influenced by O'Neill and Adams, but those are 6 issues. They were at a time when new comics were down to 17 pages, and you wouldn't believe how much they packed into whatever 6 times 17 is.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, those are all fantastic. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like Conway. Oh, well, actually, there are some Len Wein issues. Could probably pick a Len Wein one from that run.
Here's another challenge for you too, because we've joked about this a little bit, but that I don't read X-Men. I've never read X-Men and I've been very like, whatever.
Yeah.
But so my question would be, if you were to pick an issue or 2 of X-Men that would show me how great it was, what would those be? And that's probably a big task, but that might be a fun challenge too. We're talking about
could be. I feel like you and Breen would get along with that because Breen's been reading comics for a long time, and I think he doesn't feel that different than you. About it, outside of having some joy from some of it.
Yeah,
I was the difference is Clint. I'm so old that when I started reading, X-Men was a bi-monthly title, and the new kids were just getting off the ground.
Yeah.
So the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, hell, even the Defenders were a bigger deal.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you came into comics 5 or 6 years after I did, X-Men were huge, and it just kind of became everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think that's the difference. Now I thoroughly enjoyed the Claremont run.
Mm-hmm.
I it got real bloated in the 90s, but that's everything got bloated in the 90s.
Yeah.
You couldn't shake a dead comic book without hitting a Ghost Rider guest appearance. In like a 3-year window. It's just, but as far as like hell, staying away from the Dark Phoenix saga, like if you want to go back to something that Byrne and Claremont did, like the Proteus storyline would be a possibility.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, there's there's no, it's almost unfair to compare those to anything else because I'm not sure anything has topped that even to this day. And there were a lot of great Claremont collaborations in those 17 years.
But like, since Clint, you're so out of the loop on all of that, it's like, do we just do Days of Future Past then? Because it's 2 issues. Because it's kind of like we're taking Clint to a steakhouse to enjoy a nice steak, and he's going to order the lobster tails.
Here's why you don't start with that. That's not an indication of how. It's a great X-Men story, but it's not going to show you how great the X-Men are because it's older versions and most of them are dead.
Yeah.
So it's if you want one where they're a functioning current team, there are other examples to start them on.
Jason Black suggesting X-Men 25. I'll zip it and say for free comics. All right. Cam is saying X-Men 196. Days of Future Past is jumping in the deep end.
It is
ready for that, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the one that jumps out to me immediately is X-Men 133, just because it's Wolverine running around murdering a bunch of Hellfire Club members.
But I did say if we're gonna not do the Dark Phoenix saga, and that's like dead nuts in the middle of it. But that's it. If you want to become an X-Men fan, and you have to remember that here's the problem though. It's hard for someone to read that's never been into X-Men to read that. Said this is from a time before Wolverine was the most overused character, not just in comics, but arguably in all of fiction.
Hmm.
So what he was doing in this issue is like, yeah, this was just amazing to read. It's like this character is pretty cool. And I said, now you read, it's like, yeah, okay, that's great. But yeah, in
Yeah.
those days, yeah, that'd be a good one to read because that is
Yeah.
that's good.
Cam said
It's a really good one. Yeah.
that's what was great. You could actually start in many places, which yeah, that's the cool thing about comics in general for sure. But yeah, that would be an interesting one. There are some I've never read any Man Thing, but I love the character design. That's all it comes down to. I like
Sure.
Swamp Thing has a better name. Man Thing has a better character design, in
I
my
would argue
opinion.
that Swamp Thing also has the better stories.
Well, but you know
Yeah.
what? Giant size swamp thing doesn't have the same ring to it.
No, it's
Right.
true.
It's
But
not on the nose enough. Yeah.
Now, yeah, man. The thing with Man Thing is, you read a Man Thing, but he is literally a bystander, as the story unfolds around him.
Yeah.
I mean, very rarely is he actually an integral part of it, other than at some point to demonstrate that whoever knows fear shall burn at the touch of the Man Thing.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and a Swamp Thing, this is my understanding. It could be wrong. I would say you'd probably say, hey, well, you got to read. Oh gosh, I almost said Frank Miller. No,
Alan Moore.
Alan
Alan
Moore.
Moore.
You got to read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, but I don't know if you could do one issue if that would work the same.
There's some one and dones that are pretty good in that run.
Yeah. Hell, you could go back and read some of the Len Wein ones. I mean, the early issues
Yeah.
were
I
interesting in
think
their own right.
yeah, I think you could do any of the first few issues of that run, and they're fine for
Yeah.
that. It's really good stuff in there. But yeah, I mean that run's really great. You know, Alan Moore run. It might be I don't know. I guess it's the best run, like long run he did at DC. It's like the only but it's really good. I
Yeah.
do like it. I like the Nancy Collins run a lot. It's a really good run that only got collected the last few years, and I think kind of got memory hold. But
Yeah.
there's some really good stuff because she was from Louisiana and living in. I think she was living in New Orleans at the time when
Yeah.
she was writing it. When I know it's not like in New Orleans, it's in like elsewhere in the bio, but no, she pulls a lot from local mythology and stuff like that.
Yeah. That
And
makes sense.
yeah,
It'll be fun. The other would be some indie comics, and I mean, there's endless stuff there. But yeah, same thing. I'm kind of thinking of ideas, so it'd be fun. And having an agenda, so it's like planned out. I did read the issues; they were fun to read, so I felt prepared. But I'm like, yeah, I should have.
no,
Should have
for
planned
sure.
it out a
But
little better. So
well, now we could probably I could probably get Breen to do an issue of Zot if you wanted at some point.
I wouldn't be opposed to it, but there's this young man here. There's a lot of things that a lot of comics that he probably needs to read.
Mm-hmm.
You know, before there's probably a lot of bigger things. I'm not saying it has to be a big thing to be interested, but because like I said, when you say I haven't read much X-Men, like what about the Hulk? Do you have you read much Hulk?
I've read a little bit of Hulk, not a lot though.
Joe here, yep. Oh, shit, I still haven't found it.
Yeah,
But I was saying, because Joe has dreams of doing Hulk 261, but I lost mine.
It's a really good issue.
Oh.
But
okay.
yes, but if unfortunately, Joe, if I haven't found it, we might have to pick a different issue. But there's, like I said, there's some big names, some bigger characters to expose them to. What about Daredevil? Have you read Daredevils?
I love Daredevil. Yeah. I mean, I've Frank Miller's Daredevil run. I love it. I've I've got some new Daredevil. There's still a bunch I haven't read. So
Yeah, I mean, we could do the first Purple Man. There's a few things we could do if we ever
Talking
wanted
about like
to.
going back to like what number issue
Issue
3 or something, or 3 or
I think
4.
it's 3 or 4. Yeah, it's the one right before the Matador.
You like those? You like those first couple of Daredevils, don't you?
It's fun watching it transform. Like that book was really by the seat of its pants for a little bit before it finally got its footing, and it's kind of amazing.
You don't want to do number 7 where Submariner just basically spends 20 issues beating the piss out of Daredevil. I'm surprised he didn't beat him back into the yellow costume.
Yeah,
because he was a quick 0-1 in the red.
No, but yeah, I mean that, and speaking of 80s, the Andy Nocenti run is also pretty solid.
It's funny. Reading through this, there was one of the ads on the page next to it, and it was like, "Have you been reading Ann Nocenti and New Mutants?" I think it was. It's just funny, like seeing these names pop up in context of the time. I don't know what this was, 86 or something like that.
It's about
80,
right.
Yeah, 85 maybe.
So yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. All right. Well, we've got some good stuff for next time. I think it'll be fun. So it's a good excuse to get into some comic books, especially some that you might not be on the reading list. Try something new. It'll be fun. So the other thing too, I think, is I need to announce it ahead of time enough so that audience members can read it as well if they want to participate. Unless they've already read it, that's great too. But so cool. Well, thanks for being on. I think we're going to wrap up the stream. Appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you to Eric Breen and Joe Corallo for joining me on tonight's stream. And I appreciate everyone's patience with me as I've been kind of disappeared for a little while from streaming. So it's good to be back and talking about comics. So thanks very much, everybody. And we'll see you in the next stream. Bye, everyone.
Good night, kids.